All right, hi. My name is Bethany Baer, and I am so thrilled to have been invited here for you for your small conference. Little bit about my background, so you know from where I get the crazy ideas I'm about to talk to you about. I actually started in software development and IT about 20-some years ago. Spent the first several years of my career in some small startups. I was working for a little localization shop in Boulder, Colorado, and we got this call from this Seattle company, and they said, you know, we've got this website and we think it's doing pretty well. We'd like to take it international. In fact, we want to go to the UK and we want to go to Germany, and we were just going to do it on our own. And then we launched, and someone mentioned to us that our tagline doesn't really work well in the UK. In fact, the tagline was the greatest bookstore on earth. Well, in the UK, that read as mud. So Amazon knew they had to do something more. So they came to us, and we had been doing shrink wrap translations for things like HP printer driver help desks and things like that. And we had to figure out this thing called the web. We had to figure out what it meant to do real-time content translations for something as dynamic as a really big bookstore. Little did we know, right? So that was where I started, and then after that I went to Orbitz Worldwide. I spent about 10 years there doing online travel. What was really fascinating about that journey is that when I walked in the door, we had about 45 developers. And when I left, 7 years later, we had 1,000 people in our technology organization. Through the course of that growth, we figured out how to do things really well. We figured out how to break the things we used to do well and no longer did well, right? And what was working for us from an innovation perspective and what wasn't. We grew too big, we tried to act too small, we made short-term decisions, we handcuffed ourselves, and then we opened ourselves back up again. So I don't know all the answers to what makes a great innovative culture, what will allow you as software developers to expand your minds and create the next big disruption. I don't have those answers, but I do know the questions to ask because I've asked them, gotten them wrong, asked them again, gotten it kind of right, over the course of these years. So I want to talk a little bit about that with you. So why does this matter? Everyone says you must be innovative now, of course, that you have to keep pushing yourself, your product, your companies forward if you want to have amazing things in the marketplace. And that's all true, and that makes sense intuitively, but there is something else that's changed, right? You are no longer only being compared to people who do stuff like you. The competition for you now is everyone and everything. When your products, your software, are being experienced by the end user, whether that's an internal team using your tools or a true digital experience out there on the World Wide Web, you are being compared against the last best experience they had. Everyone who touches your stuff is asking, is this as efficient as Uber? Is this as relevant to me as Netflix, right? Is this as seamless an experience as Amazon? You're being compared against everything. And that's true for your internal teams and your internal deliveries as well, right? As you think about how well is your code commented, how well is your communications about what you're delivering when and how, right? How good are your release notes? You know, it's not a microcosm anymore. Everything we do is compared against the best thing that person who's doing the comparison has ever experienced. Right? The world is much bigger and much more interconnected today. So what does that mean? Last spring, I was down in Sydney, Australia. I had the great opportunity to speak at Google's headquarters there. And one of the amazing things I learned listening to Google talk was some of the things that we know and intuit about what it's like out in the digital space. Google actually knows. They know because they can measure, they know because they can see it all, which is pretty cool and really creepy, but pretty cool, right? So what they did was they looked across everything that they saw going on the web. And they tried to identify, based on a series of metrics that they came up with, who's doing it the best. Who provides the best digital experience? Who's driving the most business? Who's driving the most customer satisfaction? They did things like repeat visits and page views and time on site and transactions and compared that to market cap for public companies and all of those things. And they came up with this list that they thought were doing it the best, right? Then they went and said, well, what's common about these companies that are doing it the best? What do their sites, their experiences have in common? And the answer was sort of three things. But they thought, well, there might be more to it than just what we're seeing on their sites. So they actually went and they interviewed each one of these companies. They talked to their executives, they talked to their development teams, they talked to their product managers, and they found that the three things that they saw as driving success on their websites were actually evident in their organizations as well. It was evident in the way they executed, evident in the way that they prioritized, and I'll tell you what those three things are. So first of all, speed. Experiences that deliver well, you all know this, low latency, right? The clock starts ticking the minute the button is hit, and the expectation is that content, whether it's perceived or real latency, is incredibly low on very, very good experiences. But that's not just about the latency of the site as well. It's also about their time to market. It's about their cycle time. It's about how fast they can iterate and change, how much they can push through their development organization, how many experiments they can run, right? So speed, not just about latency, right? It was infused within these organizations. Seamlessness. We are interconnected. Every time you interact with a product, with a brand, it doesn't matter where or when you are, right? It doesn't matter whether it's on your phone or on your laptop or on your watch. Those are all part of a continuous experience. And the expectations today is 100% that experience will indeed be seamless across all of those experiences. And it's more than just messaging, more than just being on brand, that there's an awareness that exists between those interactions, right? But that also was evident in the organizations as well. So when they thought about product management and when they thought about software development and when they thought about testing and QA, they needed to make sure that those organizations and the way that they interacted was equally seamless. I had a great opportunity to work with Dave Thomas, who was one of the original Agile Manifesto guys. And he, over drinks, was very frustrated with me, very frustrated with Orbitz as we were going through our Agile transformation. This was about 2008. And he said, Bethany, you ship your organization. You think you're shipping software, but what you're shipping is your organization. Where you have cracks, where your QA teams aren't getting along with your development teams, or your requirements aren't being seamlessly discussed and integrated with your development teams, that will show up in your product, right? Every foible, every gap that you have organizationally, you will be able to look and find that in your product. You ship your organization. So seamlessness, yes, it's about a multi-channel, omni-channel experience, but it's also about how you interact with your peers across disciplines. And then relevance, right? Show me what I need, when I need, where I need it. We don't have time, either mentally or physically in the day, right, to wade through things that are not relevant to us. And that's true whether you're building an enterprise tool, whether you're thinking about the next software as infrastructure application. I've got some good friends who are working on sort of the next generation of a router to support the serverless space. And surfacing the right metrics at the right time, there's probably nothing better that they could do, right? How do I know? How do I know? How do I know? And how do you know to tell me what I need when I need it and not make me have to go find it, especially if it's 2 a.m. and something's flapping, right? So those are the three qualities that not only are evident in the best products out there, but are evident in the best organizations out there. And I would argue that when you talk about trying to unleash innovation for yourself, for your teams, for your product, for your businesses, think about these things, right? The choices that you're making every day, are those choices that help you move faster? Are those choices that help you be more seamless? Or are those choices that maybe solve today's problem, but don't support this capacity for tomorrow? So, okay, Okay, innovation. I've been talking about that a lot already this morning. So how do we define innovation? There are 1,000 definitions out there, gazillions of books about it, right? I don't know that defining it in any very particular set of terms is actually terribly useful, but what I do find useful is to think about at least 2 buckets of innovation, 2 different types of innovation. We've got the notion of disruptive innovation, right? We all sort of know it when you see it. This is something that changes a paradigm. This is the kind of innovation that makes everything that came before it seem silly, right? But equally important, and I would argue in some ways more important, is sustaining innovation. And that's the kind of work that we do, all of us, every day. We have problems. Problems are presented to us, whether those are new requirements or production support issues or whatever they might be. And when we creatively solve those problems, when we think about new patterns, new approaches, that's sustaining innovation. And it's equally important to that disruptive innovation. And again, one might argue that you don't actually start with disruptive. That some of the best, most interesting changes that we've seen in the marketplace started as sustaining innovation. That was creative in its problem solving, and then further creative, and evolved its way to a place where indeed it was actually disruptive. So I like the Uber example. We think of Uber as this thing that just came in and completely upset the way that we think about transportation, right? That's not where Uber started. Uber started with a very simple problem set. There were business travelers in the major hubs of the United States that all relied on black car service to get from the airport, to get to their meetings, to get from their hotels. And it was a really painful process. So you had to have an account, you had to have someone call them, you had to arrange for it 48 hours, maybe a week in advance. It was just painful. Right? And so they said, oh, well, there's a problem. How do we get creative about that? I know, well, let's let people do that a little bit more on demand. Let's let people make those connections real time, right? Let's create a cool app for that. There's an app for that, right? That was all they did, was try and ease the reservation and booking process for black cars. But then they realized, oh, we have a different problem. There's not enough inventory. We're a victim of our own success. Black cars, licensed cars for hire, there's not enough of them on the road now. We're doing so well. How do we find more inventory? And then this was the next really creative problem they solved, which is they said, well, gosh, maybe people who aren't professional drivers might want to do this. Gosh, maybe there are other types of people on the road that would be interested in maybe sharing their vehicle, right? And so before we knew it, they went from just solving incremental problems in really interesting ways, but again, incremental problems, to absolutely disrupting the way we think about things. But that's not where they started, right? So don't underestimate the power of sustaining innovation. Don't underestimate the power and value of every time you come into the office or sit down at the computer and have a quandary in front of you and find a new, different, better way to solve it, right? You don't know what path that's going to put you on. You don't know where that's going to lead. So sustaining innovation, like I said, is oftentimes the way to find yourself in a state where you can actually do some interesting disruption. So ingredients for innovation. We've all been in this room probably, right? If you've done Agile, you've stood there with the wall of cards and done the shuffle and had the debates and hopefully you've all had the chance to experience that. So yeah, of course we need to be Agile. Yeah, of course we need to do DevOps. Of course we do, right? But why? What is it about that? What is it about those processes? What is it about those things from an innovative perspective, from an inventiveness perspective, right? We all know the efficiencies that you get, and all of those things. But efficiency and productivity are 2 different things. And even if you're more productive, it doesn't mean that you're being more innovative. But we do know that teams that work more agilely, teams that have things like DevOps, think about CI/CD, are more apt to innovate. But why, right? I have a couple thoughts on that. One is that statistics show that only 1 in every 5 release actually exceeds the business value it was intended to do, right? In terms of experiments, we do experiments all the time with our software. We do experiments all the time with the requirement sets that we get, right? 1 in 5 is going to be a home run, right? What that means is you need to get as many swings at the ball, cricket, bat, football, whatever we want to say, as many swings as possible. And you want to lower the barrier of entry for getting those things out the door as much as you can. So you've got that 20%, right? The number of balls in play for that go up, okay? So that's one reason why. But I also think it's about how you do these things that matter, not just the doing of them, right? People talk about being agile, not just doing agile. So at the end of the day, it's how your execution is aligned to your organization that matters. And these are the questions I would ask you to ask yourselves. As you organize, as you work in your teams, software development is a team sport these days, we know that. And think about, and in some cases, at least for yourself or your most immediate coworkers, kind of demand that you're looking at things in this way. You need to ensure that you not only understand what the incentives are for you, but they're fully aligned with everyone that's on your team. And when I say on your team, I'm talking very cross-functionally. That means your partners in infrastructure, if they're not you, your partners in data, your partners in testing, your partners in product, right? You all need to understand what good looks like. And you all need to understand how you're going to measure whether it's good or not. Think about the North Star concept, right? So Google and their OKRs. This is what this is all about. Aligned incentives and measurable outcomes. And it doesn't even need to be right. They don't even need to be the best possible incentives. They don't even need to be the most accurate measurements of outcome. But having you all on the same page is going to vastly increase your chances of success. Iterative and continuous. Right, so yes, DevOps, yes, CI/CD, yes, you have to do all of those things, but why? Why is that so important, right? Why is continuous important? Yeah, it's far more efficient again, but iterative is the key here, right? Small changes that you can experiment with, small changes that you can test, that you can measure, and that only matters if you're actually measuring it, right? So being iterative without having continuity, being iterative without stopping, measuring, and understanding, right, is just taking something big and making it small. This is what actually extracts the value out of it. Accountability and autonomy. We all want autonomy. We all want to be able to make choices, to drive our software, our code where we think it should go. Well, we'll be given that autonomy when we're also accountable. But none of that works if we don't know what we're accountable to. Again, back to those outcomes that we're talking about, right? If you strive for autonomy in the software that you build, then expand your sense of accountability to outcomes and ask why. Why am I building this? Why are we developing this? What's the point of this feature? Ask why. Ask why. Build your accountability, and with it will come autonomy. Local prioritization, global governance. No one knows your software that you work on every day as well as you do. No one knows the specific aspects of the product that you're delivering every day as well as your product manager. No one knows where it's fragile, where it could break, where it's solid, better than your QA testers, right? You guys know it. People like me up in rooms, off in corners, we think we know it. We don't know it like you know it, right? So the point of this is to say, how do we have aligned global guidelines that we all are kind of pushing in the same direction, that we know what our big outcomes are that we're looking for, and then how do we let you guys that know your stuff better than anybody else make those day-to-day decisions? One of the things that I always say is that the most important decisions that get made in my company every day isn't what comes out of my brain, isn't what happens in the boardroom. It's what 500 people choose to type every day. Fingers on keyboards. Those are the most important decisions that happen in my company. And how do I make sure those are well-informed? How do I make sure that I can trust the judgment? Because they have the same perspective that I do in terms of what's important, right? Striving for that local prioritization. And the more you as individuals ask the why. Why am I doing this? What do we want to achieve with this, right? The more you show that sense of accountability for the outcomes of what you're building, the more that prioritization power comes into your hands. Experimentation is all. Let's not forget, at the end of the day, we're scientists. That's what we are, right? And the scientific method is the root of everything that we should be doing. It's not waterfall anymore. It's not building a bridge where odds are good the walls on either side are not going to move very much. We're in a dynamic, fluid space. We know this, right? Have an idea. Understand how you want to measure whether that idea is right or wrong. Do something. And then actually measure it. And then actually learn from it. The scientific method has been around for hundreds and hundreds of years because it's right. So do that. When you think about those crunch times, when you've got, I just got to get this out, I've got a deadline, it's got to ship, I'm in a spike, whatever that might be, if you shortcut making sure that you've got the right analytics, the right exhaust, right? The right way to be able to see and measure what you've delivered is actually doing what you think you're doing. You're completely cutting yourself off at the knees in terms of learning from those changes that you just made. It doesn't matter how continuous you are if you have no idea what you've done has done, right? So experimentation is all, and every step in that scientific method is absolutely critical. Continuous learning is as important as continuous delivery. All right, so I'm not going to be able to tell you about tech in a way that you don't already know. We've got some great other speakers today that are going to be able to do that. But what I do want to highlight is there are choices you make, and whether those are big system architecture choices or small choices in terms of changes you're making to your application that can make future innovation, tomorrow's capacity, easier or harder. This happens to be my architecture. This is Market Digital's. We bring data in. We do some magic to that data with amazing business logic and business applications. We've got about 500 of them. And then we present some stuff at the end of the day. Data come in, rules are applied, presentations go out. Yeah, it's not groundbreaking, right? But what's really important for us is that the kind of data that comes in our doors is different all the time. I have 4,000 different data feeds coming in from about 1,400 different providers. I bring in 2 terabytes of unstructured data through FTP every single week. Think that's predictable? Not so much, right? So I need those concerns and the kind of risk adversity that I have in terms of managing that data, because by the way, it's financial data, and if I get this stuff wrong, companies lose money, big money, right? A lot of risk adversity, a lot of very different concerns in terms of what I'm doing in terms of my data. Over here on the other end, though, presentation, right? Digital experiences. I have no idea what the next great presentation format might be. We'll talk about virtual reality, we'll talk about AR, right? All of those things. I don't know what's coming next, and I shouldn't be bound to that. I can't even settle on a front-end client-side framework, right? Because we were all about React, and then React Redux versus React Connects, and then you know what? Vue sounds better, let's try that, right? And that's okay. And the reason it's okay for me and for the 300 people that are doing these front-end presentations is because it doesn't have downstream consequences, right? I've got good segregation between my presentation layer where I need to experiment. I need to be incredibly risk tolerant, right? I need to be able to make rapid changes, and it needs to be cheap to make those changes. I need to be able to pick up the new HoloLens when it comes out, right? And play and see what it could do, without involving anyone from my application architecture or involving anyone from my data teams. I just need to be able to do it, because there's no way I'm going to keep up if I can't, right? So think about that. We all know segregation of responsibilities is important. We all know that your business logic and your presentation logic should be distinct from each other. It's hard to keep doing it, though, right? It's costly, we know this. We talk about backwards compatibility in this model, right? It's absolutely critical. If somebody's making a change in this middle layer that's being depended on by a bunch of presentation layers, some new, some old, as well as a bunch of data systems are being fed into that, it's got to be backwards compatible and forwards compatible, right? It's not cheap. Those things cost, right? But are they worth it? In my mind, always, right? Always. And what that buys me is a segregation of risk management. It buys me speed where I need it, carefulness and care where I need it, right? And this is so easy to muddle these layers. You know this. You get that requirement. Again, you're in that spike. You got that delivery. It's so easy to say, I I'm not getting the data the way I really need it out of that application. That's okay. I'll just transform it up here. So easy. So expensive in the long run, though. So really quickly, what does it look like? And I have no idea where I'm at on time. Ooh, 6 minutes. OK, here we go. So relevance. We've talked about relevance, seamlessness, speed. Again, I've said this multiple times, know your why. Relevance right now, personalization is the buzzword. Everyone's talking about it, everyone's trying to build it. It's kind of like mobile apps were in 2008. You guys remember that? When everyone was like, oh, let's have a mobile app. Why? I don't know, the board said we need a mobile app. Put one out there, right? But why? What does that do? How does that help the client? How does that help our customers? How does that help our business? Why? So relevance is going this way. Personalization's popping up everywhere. Hi, Johnny, right? But why? So if you're talking about content personalization, hi, Johnny, that's great. That usually is about trust. You're trying to establish trust, right? If trust is what you want to establish with your clients, yes, you're logged in correctly. Yes, we have access to your data. Yes, we know it's you. If you go to hit that transaction button, you probably didn't get spearphished. This is us and this is you, right? It's about establishing that trust. If you really care about ease of use, segmentation is really important, right? So this idea that in the financial space, for example, you're a day trader, you're at home playing with your stuff versus a big institutional broker. Those guys want to do different things when they come to my sites, right? So if I want to make sure they can do the things they need to do as fast, basic segmentation. You guys are like group A, you're group B, you do different things. So that's the why to do that, though, is to create that better ease of use. And engagement, right? So if you think about the Netflix model, so you clicked on A, I'll give you B. I saw that you read this article, I saw that you watched this movie, I saw that you went to this page 5 times in a day. Aha, that tells me something about you. I'm going to now present you something relevant to that, right? So that's behavioral-driven personalization, and that's usually about engagement. You clicked 3 times, I really want to encourage you to click the 4th. Right? But the whole point of bringing this example up isn't to sort of teach you guys about personalization. I've actually got a whole speech about that. But it's about asking the why always, and knowing the why as you're making the choices that you're making. Seamlessness, do you guys know the difference between omni-channel and multi-channel? Multi-channel just means that you're there. It means you've got the web app, it means you've got the mobile app, it means you've got the watch alerts, right? Omni-channel means that each one of those experiences and each one of those channels is aware of the other, that it's truly seamless. So when I set a preference for a chart on my mobile phone, the next time I go to my desktop, it's there. When I've browsed for, Amazon does this amazingly, right? When I've browsed for something in one space, the next space knows about that, right? So as you think about the software choices that you're making, think about this. Don't lock your data in a jail, right? Don't think about your exhaust as only what you need. Think about, well, when someone comes along next and builds that next interface for that next channel, whether that's brick and mortar or HoloLens or whatever it might be, how do I make sure they know what I've got going on? And how do I make sure I know what they've got going on? VR, speed. So again, this comes back to this notion that speed is not just about latency. Yes, it's about latency, but it's also not just about latency. It's how do you reduce that barrier? How do you get as fast as you need to get, where you need to go? How do you allow an interface that feels as different as VR might feel to be experimented with and released as quickly as a website or as a mobile app, right? I was asked by our board of directors about 5 years ago, what are you worried about? What's coming next? What are you thinking about? This is 5 years ago. And I said, well, we went from typing to tapping, and pretty soon we're going to be talking, which we are. Conversational UI is a thing for sure, and we've got our smart speakers, Internet of Things. But now if I were to answer, I'd say, yeah, we're typing, we're tapping, we're talking. Next, we're going to be gesturing, right? And how do we stay ready for that? What we found when mobile came on the scene is that it had an outsized influence on the way we thought about and designed our web experiences, right? Even before, when mobile adoption was low, long before Google tipped that 51% into mobile usage, right? We were designing websites differently because of the mobile experience, which was right. Pretty soon, we're going to be designing them differently because of the VR experience. You went from very, very small to almost limitless. Think about the data density associated with VR, right? How are your applications going to be ready for that? Even if no one ever uses VR, the expectations of that level of data density and that level of interaction are going to make their way into everything that you're building. Are you ready for it? So thank you so much for all of your time. I hope this gives you some things to think about. You've got an amazing panel of folks that are coming up talking about testing, talking about your brain and how it works as you're coding. I was really looking forward to that serverless conversation because that's very cool. But I think we've got really great things lined up anyway. So think about this, though. Think about why. Why might I need to employ a different testing strategy? Why might I need to think about serverless for my applications? Why? Does it help me move faster? Does it allow me to be more seamless between my interactions? Does it bring more clarity in my organizational dependencies? Why? Why? All right. Go be innovative. Thank you, everybody.